So Daksha is very angry and he is expressing his discontent heart to Narada in very obnoxious ways. So he made actually three confrontations so far, and today we are going to hear about four more. The three confrontations that he had already done is that first thing he said that you are not a true saint because you have been unfair to me. Secondly, he said that you have induced my sons, the 11,000 sons, to neglect their obligations. And number three is very strong. He says that you are violent, shameless, and devoid of all compassion. So today we are going to hear four more complaints and then a curse from Daksha to Narada. So the fourth complaint is that you have become enemies of those who are not your enemies. The 39th verse, Daksha says, all the devotees of the Lord, but you are very kind to the conditioned souls. So all but you are very kind to conditioned souls and are eager to benefit them. Although you wear the dress of a devotee, you create enmity with people who are not your enemies, or you break friendship and create enmity between friends. The specific word in Sanskrit is sahrida ghanam, that you create enmity between friends. Are you not ashamed of posing as a devotee while performing these abominable actions? Prabhupada writes in the purport, number 39, um, pointing out the difficulties that preachers have to face when trying to distribute Krishna consciousness in the world. Prabhupada writes, such are the criticisms that must be borne by the servants of Narad Muni in the disciplic succession. Through the Krishna consciousness movement, we are trying to train young people to become devotees and return home back to Godhead by following rigid regulative principles. But our service is appreciated neither in India nor abroad in the um, Western countries, where we are endeavoring to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. So the India that the confrontations that Srila Prabhupada used to face were the caste brahmanas would complain, why are you giving initiation to all these non-Indians? How can you make them brahmanas? That they were displeased. And in the Western world, the parents of the youngsters who were taking deep interest in Krishna consciousness, they were getting totally displeased. Um, but Prabhupada's message had been always very consistent. It's not about actually leaving anything. It's about leaving material conceptions of life. And therefore, he had been thoroughly misunderstood. So Prabhupada continues, we have no business creating enemies, but the process is such that non-devotees will always be inimical toward us. Nevertheless, as stated in the Shastras, a devotee should be both tolerant and merciful. Devotees engaged in preaching should be prepared to be accused by ignorant persons, and yet they must be very merciful to the fallen conditioned souls. If one can execute his duty in the disciplic succession of Narad Muni, his service will surely be recognized. And then Prabhupada writes a very important line in that purport. Preaching can be a difficult, thankless task, but a preacher must follow the orders of the Supreme Lord and be unafraid of materialistic persons. The next complaint, or complaint number 5 from Daksha, is that this is a very valid complaint, or you can say it's a very valid point. And the point is that premature renunciation cannot help detach oneself from matter. What is needed is really knowledge. So this 40th verse is a very important point that Daksha is making. If you think that simply awakening the sense of renunciation will detach one from the material world, I must say that unless full knowledge is awakened, simply changing dress as you have done cannot possibly bring detachment. The first first part is correct, that yes, simple change of dress is not the key. But the point is that Narad Muni is extremely qualified to awaken full knowledge in anyone, you know. So that's the part that Daksha is missing. Then therefore, he's saying that simply changing the dress as you have done, that is wrong. So Prabhupada actually therefore joins forces with Daksha in bringing out the superficiality and hypocrisy sometimes disguised within the step of renunciation or within the external garb of renunciation. And Prabhupada points out that the Daksha was actually unaware that Narada had actually aroused the spirit of renunciation in the Haryashvas and Savalashvas through full knowledge. And therefore, such enlightened renunciation is totally desirable. So that is the key point. And therefore, Prabhupada continues to say, Prajāpati Daksha's accusation that Narad had not actually elevated his sons to the platform of knowledge was not factual. All the sons of Prajapati Daksha had first been raised to the platform of Gyan and had then automatically renounced this world. So this point is extremely vital, you know. So we cannot hasten the process. We cannot just leave everything and go to the Himalayas or join the temple. These kind of steps, like if it is done prematurely, it can be totally wrong. So the key point is that one should have the backing of realization before one takes the step forward. And Daksha is making the same point actually. But the point that Daksha is missing is that because of the association of Narad Muni, the the 11,000 sons of Daksha, they have been raised to that level where they can take the step of renunciation with full realization, with full knowledge. And that's the point that Daksha is missing there. And therefore, the most important point in that purport is that all the sons of Prajapati Daksha had first been raised to the platform of Gyan and had then automatically renounced this world. Okay. Then 41st verse, the complaint is that if you somehow take away the material experience from the life of a student, wouldn't that inhibit actual renunciation? Because after all, the material world acts as a school of hard knocks. And when you go through the school of hard knocks, you learn deeper lessons. And that's the point that Daksha is making. There is also a good point, actually. So Daksha is saying material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all happiness, all unhappiness. So this Daksha also understands that material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all unhappiness. But one cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false material happiness. Then, without help from others. Now, this is a very um, strong statement from Daksha. Without help from others. Then, without help from others, one will find material enjoyment detestful. Those whose minds are changed by others do not become as renounced as those who have personal experience. I really love this verse actually, because here Daksha is making a very, very good point that unless there is a backing of personal experience and realization, just based on hearing and then taking the steps forward prematurely can cause havoc. And that's what Daksha is saying. But what Daksha is missing is the power of a pure devotee like Narad Muni, who just by his presence, he can transform the hearts of people. And therefore, by neglecting that point, he is offending Narad Muni. So his realizations are not that bad, actually, if you read the logic that he's presenting here. And so Prabhupada actually refutes Prajapati Daksha's logic in this way in the purport number 41. That according to Daksha's philosophy, one should become implicated in material enjoyment so that after experiencing the distress of such enjoyment, one will automatically renounce. This is the logic that Daksha is giving. Now, here is the very important point Prabhupada is making in this purport. Material nature, however, is so strong that although a man suffers at every step, He will not cease his attempts to enjoy. That is the whole problem. Tripyanti neha kripana bahu dukkha bhaja. This is coming from Prahlad Maharaj's prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. Very important verse that is quoted here. Under the circumstances, unless one gets the association of a devotee like Narad Muni or his servant in the disciplic succession, one's dormant spirit of renunciation cannot be awakened. The association is the key, and that's the point that Dakṣa is missing. So Prabhupada writes later, making it more contemporary. Um, the young boys and girls of the Krishna consciousness movement have given up the spirit of material enjoyment not because of practice, but by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his servants. And this point needs to be understood thoroughly. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur presents in his own style this particular verbal attack of Dakṣa. He's saying that because you are ignorant, like as if Dakṣa is saying to Nārada, because you are ignorant, just as I just said, you should hear from me about the royal path of detachment. Without having experienced the suffering that comes from material enjoyment, how can a person understand that existential suffering? Understanding such suffering makes a person become detached naturally. But this detachment doesn't happen when his intelligence is torn apart by someone like you. This is the way Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is expressing the complaint number 6. Now, complaint number 7, the final one leading up to the curse, that you have completely displeased me, even though I am totally sinless and follower of Vedic injunctions. And I particularly cannot tolerate your misguiding my sons the second time. First time, I have forgiven you when you dealt with the 10,000 sons. But now, this 1,000 more, I just can't. So he's saying that although I live in household life, so this is now Dakṣa is sort of justifying his own position. He's saying, although I live in household life with my wife and children, I honestly follow the Vedic injunctions by engaging in fruitive activities to enjoy life without sinful reactions. I have performed all kinds of yagyas, including the Deva Yagya, Rishi Yagya, Pitri Yagya, and Nr Yagya. So in this way, Dakṣa is establishing, I am a perfect grihastha. Because these yagyas are called vratas or vows, I am known as a grihavrata. The same word grihavrata is going to be used by Prahlad Maharaj to Hiranyakashipu in 7th canto. So at that time, you can take note. Unfortunately, you have given me great displeasure by misguiding my sons for no reason to the path of renunciation. This can be tolerated once, but not twice. That's the point. So Prabhupada writes in that purport number 42, Prajāpati Dakṣa wanted to prove that he had been most tolerant in not having said anything when Narad Muni for no reason induced his 10,000 innocent sons to adopt the path of renunciation. Wanting to prove that he had been magnanimous to Narad Muni, Prajāpati Dakṣa stressed that when Narad had misled his first sons, Dakṣa had taken no action. He had been kind and tolerant. So this is the nature of persons whose heart is not completely purified. When our heart is contaminated with lower vices, we always try to justify. It is said that when we justify, we don't purify. When we justify, we don't purify. Keep this in mind. So whenever we are sort of justifying our stance and saying, I am okay, I don't have any room for improvement, then automatically all doors for improvement will remain closed forever. So a real student, a good student is always in a learning mode, keeping the door open, that I have so much of room for improvement. And that is in general valid. But in the case of Dakṣa, he's saying, I'm fine, I'm totally good, I'm filled with all good qualities. So he's basically saying, I had been very kind and tolerant. So he was aggrieved, however, because Narad Muni had misled his sons for a second time. Therefore, he wanted to prove that Narad Muni, although dressed like a sadhu, was not actually a sadhu. He himself, although a householder, was a greater sadhu than Narad Muni. This is how the envious heart of Daksha is coming out, and finally resulting in a curse. Now, this curse becomes a blessing in disguise for Narad Muni. So, this is the 43rd verse where Daksha issues his curse. You have made me lose my sons once, and now you have again done the same inauspicious thing. Therefore, you are a rascal who does not know how to behave toward others. You may travel all over the universe, but I curse you to have no residence anywhere. So now, if you curse Narad Muni like that you don't have residence anywhere, Narad will be super happy because that's what he wanted. He wanted to not have a fixed place of residence and just move around and glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every nook and corner of creation. And that's what Narada is doing. So Prajapati Daksha cursed Narada in retaliation, but Daksha's pronouncement of curse, which is done in a harsh way, somehow or other aligned with Narada's mood and mission. And therefore, Narada was very happy actually hearing that curse. So Prabhupada actually in the purport points out that actually this curse is also on me. In other words, he's saying that in the parampara system from Narad Muni, I have also been cursed. Although I have many centers that would be suitable places of residence, I cannot stay anywhere. For I have been cursed by the parents of my young disciples. This is how Prabhupada humorously put it. And in this way, Prabhupada is happy just traveling the world within the span of 11 years. He had circled the globe 13 times. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's words presenting the curse to Narad Muni: you will also have misfortune, O you who cause separation from children. You have caused my sons to fall from their position. Therefore, you will have no place of residence in the world. Now, here comes the final verse where we can see the mood of Narad Muni. He heard so many accusations, so much of harsh treatment. But did Narad Muni try to justify his position? No. Did he try to explain that no, he was right in helping his Daksha's 11,000 sons? No. What did Narad do? He just replied very simply, Tad Badham. Tad Badham, meaning, yes, what you have said is good. I accept this curse. In fact, Narad has so much of potency, he could have, this is what Shukadev Goswami is writing, that he could have counter-cursed Prajapati Daksha. But because he is a tolerant and merciful sadhu, he took no action whatsoever. So Prabhupada writes in the purport number 44, the pure intention behind Narad Muni's tolerating Daksha's criticism as well as his curse. Now it may be asked why Narad Muni stayed in the presence of Prajapati Daksha and tolerated all his accusations and curses. Was that for Daksha's deliverance? The answer is yes. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that after being insulted by Prajapati Daksha, Narad Muni should have left immediately. But he purposely stayed to hear all Daksha's strong words so that Daksha might be relieved of his anger. Prajapati Daksha was not an ordinary man. He had accumulated the results of many pious activities. And we saw like over a billion years of austerity, unthinkable for any ordinary person, even extraordinary person, unthinkable for even extraordinary persons. Therefore, Narad Muni expected that after delivering his curse, Daksha, satisfied and freed from anger, would repent his misbehavior and thus get a chance to become a Vaishnava and be delivered. When Jagai and Madhai offended Lord Nityananda stood tolerantly, and therefore both brothers fell at his lotus feet and repented. Consequently, they later became perfect Vaishnavas. So this is the mood of Narad Muni that we can appreciate and try to follow in the footsteps of. Now, in the Sixth canto, chapter 5, Narad Muni's cryptic words to the Haryashvas confirm and, in fact, add to Maharaj Rishabdev's conclusion. And his conclusion was the importance of seeking transcendence rather than this chasing after the petty pleasures of this material world. But simply feeling sort of hatred for material life was not Rishabdev's teaching. Rather, he taught that the purpose of life is to cultivate transcendental consciousness. And ultimately, that meant cultivating devotion. And we see that Prajāpati Dakṣa, who was a devotee, he maintained his material desires. And in fact, that fostered a fault finding mentality. So the whole material consciousness ultimately drove him to curse Narad Muni. And therefore, despite Krishna's affection for all of his devotees, something that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur notes in his comment to the first verse of the first chapter of the sixth canto, that this pastime indicates that the practitioners of bhakti should consider their material desires weeds. That is, we should not cultivate them as if fulfilling them is a desired result of practicing bhakti. So this is something that we can draw out as a lesson so far in the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So now there will be a change of context. We'll hear about the progeny of Dakṣa. So Dakṣa gave up on creating sons. Next week, he will shift into generating daughters. And then we will hear about some wonderful stories coming up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.